Okay, we have some breaking news with Al Jazeera's correspondent Ismail al-Ghoul, we understand, has been killed along with his cameraman in Gaza. More details, of course, on that as we get it, but we are going to speak to Maan Bishara, who's in London, obviously monitoring all the developments. Marwan, extremely distressing news that Ismail al-Ghoul, the Al Jazeera Arabic correspondent, along with his cameraman Rami, al-Refee, have lost their lives in Gaza. A clear reminder of the serious ramifications of what it is to be a journalist operating in Gaza and getting information out of Gaza.
It's really horrible. It's horrific. I watched Ismail over the past several weeks, especially, and it's quite amazing to see these young people, Al Jazeera correspondents, working so diligently, so calmly and collectively from Gaza while bombs go off everywhere around them. And he seemed to me anyway, and sounded to me, and especially looked to me like an incredibly professional journalist, although at a very young age. And it's really getting tiring, Israel killing these young journalists, whether working for Al Jazeera or other. We've been saying about how this war has turned out to be a war on children, and it's certainly a war on journalists. And that's not a cliche, that's not even a soundbite, that's not even a line. It's horrible that our colleagues continue to be killed and assassinated the way they have been, and their family members and so on and so forth. Yes, they are part and parcel of the population in Gaza, and they suffer like the population suffered, because Al Jazeera, has not exactly been parachuting journalists. They are part and parcel of the fabric of the Palestinian society, and they understand, what is going on, and they are able to report so objectively. And yet they are targeted the way they are targeted. They continue to die in the service of doing their work, but also in the service of sticking around with their people as they tell the rest of the world what is going on in Gaza. So many of our colleagues have been killed thus far. This is just too much. And at the same time, we are banned, really, by a bunch of fanatics and fascists that continue to carry their genocidal war in Gaza. It's just beyond belief that the rogue government that is on trial for genocide, that is being pursued by the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court for war crimes, that is found in violation of more occupation, of torture, of tormenting the Palestinian people, of launching a war on children and on hospitals, and yet continues also to target journalists the way it does, trying to kill the messengers.
Yeah, Marwan, you raise an important point there, of course, because amongst all of the allegations that have been directed at Israel and its conduct in its war on Gaza, of course, the killing of journalists constitutes a war crime, doesn't it? This adds to a growing list of allegations levelled against the Israeli leadership. It looks, by the sounds of it, as if we have... Oh, we do have Marwan. Marwan, I wonder if did you hear that question? Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. Absolutely. We generally refer, for example, even we at Al Jazeera, when we refer to Hamas, for example, we refer, and it's seen or it's considered by a number of countries, usually Western countries, as a terrorist organization. I think it's probably time we start repeating to Israel every time we mention Israel that it's considered by most countries in the world to be carrying genocide, by most countries in the world to be in violation of international law. Israel is considered by most countries in the world to be an occupying power in violation of international law. Israel is considered by most countries in the world to be a rogue state, not a state of laws, but an outlaw state that continues to target journalists, kill children, kill doctors and nurses and academics, and killed some 40,000 civilians. So perhaps, just as we say Hamas is considered a terrorist organization by a number of countries, we should also start mentioning that Israel is considered and is certainly indicted by the International Court of Justice, certainly pursued by the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, and it certainly has been called out by the highest court of the land as in violation of international law again and again and again. And the latest episode is the killing of journalists. Israel has become, by each and every measure, the leading country in the world in terms of the killing of journalists and killing of children.
Marwan, we're going to go now to Gaza and we're going to speak to Hani Kudri, somebody who knows all too well about the stresses and strains of working in a war zone, of course. And Hind, I understand, of course, you would have known Ismail al-Ghoul very well. Tell us about him, tell us about his devotion to the job.
Well, Ismail was covering the war since day one, and he has been covering everything in the north parts of the Gaza Strip, especially after the Gaza Strip has been split into two, the north and the south. He was separated from his family. He used to always post about his daughter and how he has been separated from her, and he chose to stay in the north to report for Al Jazeera, and he was counting the days where he's going to reunite with his family. He was killed with his cameraman, Rami, al-Refee, and they were killed. They were directly targeted in a white car where they were killed. They were wearing their press jackets. They were covering the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh. They were on their way back from his house in al-Shati refugee camp, and that's how the Israeli forces targeted them. We're talking about 4 journalists from Al Jazeera now: Shireen, Ismail, Hamza, and also Samir. 4 journalists from Al Jazeera have been killed so far. But not only that, according to the Palestinian Ministry, they just announced that 165 Palestinian journalists have been killed since October 7, and those journalists were all working on the ground when they were targeted. There's viral photos right now on how Ismail and Rami were targeted. It shows that they were wearing their press jackets every single day. Al Jazeera Arabic used to broadcast Ismail's reports, talking about different types of reports. So we're talking about airstrikes, the sewage, the famine, everything. And I had this call with Ismail a couple of days ago, and we were talking about helping Palestinians sick in the northern parts and trying to find a way to evacuate to the southern parts of the Gaza Strip. Ismail was not only a journalist, but he was trying his best to help everyone in the north, to help to find food for everyone in the north, and he was just a very kind person. And despite the fact that we did not see each other for 10 months after being separated from the southern parts and the northern parts of the Gaza Strip, we're still in contact, talking to each other about everything and helping each other to air and to report about the Gaza Strip and this ongoing genocide.
And Hind, it is precisely because of the information that has got out to the world from the likes of Ismail, his cameraman Rami, and indeed yourself, that the world has a clearer understanding of some of the atrocities that are happening there in Gaza on a daily basis. I can hear it in your voice, Hind. This is an incredibly emotional moment for you and the team, and obviously for the whole Al Jazeera family. Can you give us a sense of the kind of precautions, the safety concerns, the measures that you have to go through on a daily basis, and Ismail would have had to go through to do his job?
We do everything. We wear our press jackets, we wear our helmets. We try to not go to anywhere where it's not safe. We try to go to anywhere where to keep our security, but we have been targeted in normal places where normal citizens are. We're trying to do everything, but at the same time, we want to report. We want to tell the world what's going on. It's heartbreaking to report this today, and it's heartbreaking to report Shireen's killing, Hamza's killing, and Samir's killing. And this is not the first time we're doing this, but every time it feels as if it's the first time. It's a great loss for us here, journalists in Gaza, and especially Al Jazeera's team losing such a colleague.
Hind, listen, we really, really appreciate your reporting and for sharing your memories of Ismail and Rami. Thank you very much for now. OK, well, Hamda's here in the studio. I mean, Hamda, what do we say to that? I mean, extraordinary, really, the level of devotion our colleagues in Gaza go through on a daily basis just to get the information out. These people are living their job. These people have family members there. As we heard there from Hind, Ismail has a young daughter. I just wonder what the world would be making of the conflict were it not for the work of these people.
This is difficult. As a journalist, this is a difficult conflict to cover. The Palestinian journalists in Gaza are the only voice from there. Israel has not allowed foreign press inside unless you are with them on some sort of military embed. But even then, they censor what you can see. They show you what they want to show you, saying, we have achieved this in this area. The Israeli army has repeatedly targeted and attacked journalists in Gaza who are doing nothing but trying to get the story out there to the entire world because they are our lifeline there. We would not know what is going on unless it was for these journalists, these brave Palestinian journalists in the Gaza Strip. And whenever the Israeli military is asked about this, whenever they are pressed on the issue of killing journalists and media workers, more than 100 have been killed since the start of this war. This is the deadliest conflict for journalists on record. And whenever they're asked about it, they say that they do not target journalists. They do what they can to protect civilians, which is simply not true. The reality on the ground shows a much different story. And then oftentimes when these journalists are targeted, the Israeli army comes out with some sort of statement saying that they have evidence that these journalists were involved in some sort of fighting groups, which is also not true, which has been denied time and time again. But the reality on the ground shows how difficult it is to cover this story during war, during a blockade, during a siege, where the information, it's so important for it to get out there. And the Israeli army always denies the wrongdoing here.
And who controls the narrative is such an important aspect of this conflict, because it's not only a conflict on the ground, it's an information war. Before we carry on our conversation, I understand we can probably see some images of the car in which Ismail al-Ghoul was killed. I wonder if we can see those pictures of the car of Ismail al-Ghoul. There it is. You were talking about sort of civilian infrastructure being targeted, of civilian ambulances, ordinary vehicles being targeted. Obviously, we wait to see whether Israel will issue a response, but given their track record previously, it's always been one of abject denial, of saying, look, you know, these people may have had links to Hamas fighters, of obfuscating multiple times.
Well, the Israeli army, Israeli politicians alike, are always quick to issue denials that they did any wrongdoing in Gaza. There hasn't been any admission of unlawful killing of a Palestinian. The only time there was this sort of admission from the Israeli military was when they killed their own captives who were calling for help. But time and time again, we've seen the targeting of journalists. We have seen innocent Palestinians, civilians who've been killed. You're talking about a war that's considered a genocide. And there have been 40,000 people who've been killed. And Israel still denies any wrongdoing, saying that they're acting in self-defense, saying that Hamas is, quote, using these civilians as human shields. But we've seen it so many times where there are vehicles of journalists that are targeted, that are clearly marked as press. And I want to note, Ismail al-Ghoul was arrested at Al-Shifa hospital several months ago, tortured by the Israeli army for doing nothing but reporting on the job. And when he was finally released due to all the pressure that came about on the Israeli army, they still denied any wrongdoing, saying that they were arresting, quote unquote, terror suspects, anyone who knew anything about Hamas in the area. But this includes journalists. The targeting of journalists is something that we know is all too familiar to the Israeli military. Look at our own colleagues at Al Jazeera. It didn't just start with this war on Gaza. Look at Shireen Abu Akleh, who was killed several years ago, and there's still been no justice for her death. There's been no justice for any journalist who's been killed by the Israeli military.
Yeah, mounting evidence of journalists being deliberately targeted. And as you say there, Ismail al-Ghoul was held for 12 hours back in March, severely beaten by Israeli forces, now killed.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.